What happens when role models cross the fine line between being necessary and believing themselves indispensable? We find out after the intro. Referents are necessary. They are the intermediaries between the team and the coaching staff or the leaders. In the right measure, they help. Although, if you are not careful, that group becomes a kind of brotherhood. And what was, at the time, positive, becomes harmful. Look, there have been cliques since football is football. So, in order not to make this tedious, we are going to review the most mediatic ones of this century in South America. First, 2 small disclaimers. In the video there are many extracts of statements from protagonists. If you are interested in reading some, I recommend that you pause, read it calmly and then continue, so that you do not miss anything. Second, this is not an opinion video. You will never hear me say, it is good, it is bad. Whether you like it or not, everything happened. I am only limiting myself to showing you what the media said at the time, and I leave you with some other questions that I ask myself. Finish.
¿Me entendieron?
Clarifications ready. Let's start.
Friends will be friends when you're in need of love to give you care and attention.
Argentina, post-World Cup Germany. Néstor Piqueman leaves, and Alfio Bossele arrives, a coach with a long and successful career. Everything was going well. Players at the peak of their careers, an almost perfect Copa America, and a qualifying round that, despite a few setbacks, did not endanger Argentina's presence in South Africa. But within the team, something was not working well. Close sources confirmed that the coach wanted to get rid of the young stars Lionel Messi and Sergio Aguero, as he was tired of their childish behavior. Far from facing the situation with maturity, his friends were waging a cold war on him. They did not pay attention to his instructions, questioned his tactical approaches, and even his superstitions. And yes, they were 20 years old, rich and famous. What did you want?
Obvio.
Coco's idea of not calling up the budding Barcelona star did not find a quorum either within the squad or with Julio Grondona, president of the Argentine Association at that time, who, alarmed by the possibility of losing the contracts that were behind the new 10, took matters into his own hands. He waged a cold war with the coach, chose a successor, and freed up the area for the mutiny. What area? Concentration of the Olympic team in Beijing, August 2008. The former head of the national team's press office says that the chosen one had a free pass, and the plot was brewing in his successor's room. A member of the same squad warned Coco that 6 professionals were conspiring against him. Coco ignored it, until the evidence was irrefutable. Match day 8 of the qualifiers, Argentina scores, and part of the team, coincidentally, the part involved, celebrates by hugging Gabriel Heinz, alleged leader of the boycott, on the bench for an own goal in the previous match day. And Messi, after the defeat against Chile, declared without any problem or codes that
la selección no venía jugando bien y a lo mejor necesitaba un cambio.
¿Perdón?
A lo mejor necesitaba un cambio.
Parece que es clarito.
Without much room for doubt, Bossele resigned. It was the first blow of what the media would call a Club de Amigos, using the name of a real club to denote the character of that group. Diego took over, with the only merit of having been, at one time, the best player in the world. And so it went, the World Championship of the Vuvuzelas almost out the window and several embarrassments on top. New frustration, new times, new leaders, and new members. With the successive call-ups, the press and fans knew what was the requirement to join the clique.
Parece que es clarito.
Sabella, a cultivator of harmony, saw the situation, left the group alone, and the results covered everything up. Well, almost. But when everything goes wrong, the miseries come to light. And that happened after Brazil. The frustrations accumulated at the same time that the club devoured coaches. As a last card, the coach of the moment was brought in, the one that many will never admit they cried out for. He had experienced something similar on the other side of the mountain range, so he tried the same tactic, but the conflict blew up in his face. After several short circuits and slights from the already established Barcelona star, which reminded us of those times with Bossele, it is clear that he had not matured much in 10 years. The club made it very clear to the former bank employee that everything and when I say everything, I mean everything, had to be agreed upon with them. The first matches of Putin's World Cup went by, and with elimination as a palpable reality, the leaders, with the support of the new president of the association, warned Sampa, more or less, that he should not even bother putting together the team, that they would do it.
No, esto ya es demasiado.
What followed, well known, inside cutting wires with the but an elimination in the round of 16. Sampaoli left, getting paid for what they did to him, and the former little boss, pointed out from all sides, announced his departure.
Está bien, me voy.
Another harmony-loving player arrived, and the Ducklings were getting back on track, while the club was making way for the new batch. And the results, like Sabella's time, were back. Is it the end of the Club of Friends?
¿Hasta cuándo nos vas a tener en suspenso? ¡Habla de una vez!
No, actually, it was updated. Now it's the Gang. A new Club of Friends? We'll see.
No, de nuevo no.
No de nuevo, decía.
Fiesta, qué fantástica, fantástica esta fiesta. Qué fantástica, fantástica esta fiesta.
The generation that many consider the golden generation. On the pitch.
Un crack, sin ninguna duda.
Off it.
Fiesta, fiesta, fiesta.
We know the story almost by heart. While they were developing their careers in the top leagues of Europe, Bielsa was integrating them into the senior team. An unprecedented campaign in the qualifiers and a good World Cup in South Africa. El Loco left and Claudio Borghi took over, with a different style, but fundamentally, a different treatment of the leaders. And the problems began. With this I do not mean that one is better than the other, I only emphasize that there are groups that need specific management. And this was the case.
Por ejemplo,
the first warning, or, at least, the most public, was in 2011, in the middle of the qualifiers, there was a baptism party for Jorge Valdivia's son. El Bichi gave permission to 5 players on the condition that they return to the training camp on time. Not only did they arrive late, but they did so in a state, let's say, unsuitable for professionals. There were sanctions, but also pardons, something that was taken more as a free letter than a vote of confidence. Proof of this is that some of them relapsed. Bichi was fired and Jorge Sampaoli arrived, a kind of mix of his predecessors, Bielsa-style play, but Borghist-style group management. And this mix enhanced everything that the group had been showing for a while, an unforgettable era of achievements, along with another forgettable one of scandals. All under the permissive gaze of leaders and coaches who only cared about benefiting from them as much as possible. It was the birth of the Banda Pitillo, the name given to the WhatsApp group of the leaders, a group where, as it was later learned, everything was talked about except football. Sampaoli leaves, in his own style, rejecting his share of responsibility in the situation. And soon, the negative attitudes became more and more noticeable. It didn't seem so serious because the results were coming. But one day, the tap was turned off, out of Russia 2018, internal problem made public and downhill road. And speaking of networks, a new WhatsApp group, with a clear allusion to how the groups are AL excluded and the indisputable nature of its presence in the team. They had taken over the selection. And they began to influence the summoned and the technicians. Such was the situation that, when the media asked why Marcelo Diaz had stopped being called up, the one who responded was Arturo Vidal.
Descarado.
The 2019 Copa America was a mirage. Despite the good result, the Red without Toads began to talk about renewal. Of course, a renewal with them inside. The reality check was post-pandemic, a disastrous 2021, being news more for controversies and disorders than for the football played. In the middle, a hug of reconciliation more false than the red dollar. Illusion for the networks. Inside, nothing had changed.
No, te digo, ni me sorprende.
So much failure together was a lot. The leadership, at this point, already pointed out as the real culprit, heard the popular clamor and trying to save its head, looked for the replacement. Although, I think they didn't expect something so brutal. Eureka arrives with the broom and the golden one became the erased one. But there was a price to pay. That replacement came, at least, 8 years late. And it was felt, out of the Copa America 2024 without scoring goals and on the way to watch their third World Cup followed on television. And that's where the now scorned generation took advantage. With the talented and misplaced Arturo Vidal as a standard bearer, they spread their opinion through the networks and related media. The reactions of the king in streaming denigrating the coach became common. How does that help the national team? You can tell me it happens that he wants to help. Maybe. Although some, like the journalist Cristobal Guerrero, would have some doubts about the true intentions of Artito and company.
El dinero no es todo, pero con más ayuda. El dinero no es todo.
October 2024, Luis Suarez dropped a bombshell. Unscheduled meetings and a rarefied atmosphere resulted in 1 point out of 6 against accessible rivals, with performances that caught the eye. And for what? The country was divided between those in favor of Bielsa. There was talk of a boycott and a club of friends of Suarez, and those who supported the Pistolero. Or, rather, those who hated the Rosario native, either because he was Bielsa, because he was Argentine, or because of 2002. But for others, like the journalist Damian Herrera, the explanation is deeper and suspicious. Broadly speaking, since a group of leaders gave him power, the football of the country of the GOAT was managed, as he saw fit, by the representative Francisco Paco Casol. Players, clubs, coaches, journalists, contracts, and even the national team itself, nothing escaped his control.
Este hombre que tiene un proyecto en la vida, ¿no?
Until 2 events began to limit his power. In 2006, the Uruguayan Association declared war on the parasite. For years, things remained on hold. Of course, we are talking about the best era of the Sky Blue team since it began to be televised in color. There was even a movement of players, called Más Unidos que Nunca, led by the Diegos, supported by a key name in this story, who faced Casol and his empire. And in 2018, the intervention of the association for not complying with the transparency requirements demanded by FIFA and CONMEBOL. Ignacio Alonso took over, contrary to the businessman, and with the support of Infantino, Dominguez and the top brass of more united than ever. Surprise! But the results were no longer there, and Paco took revenge. His spokesman denounced that Más Unidos que Nunca had become a club of friends like, and that it was time for a change. There was no doubt, Casol wanted to regain power in the association. Although, when the river sounds, it brings water. At least that is what can be deduced from what Suarez said in the famous interview. I don't know about you, but he came up with some rather strange concepts. Is not consulting a reference disrespectful? Why would Bielsa have to explain to almost retired players, with physical problems or far from top competition, the reason for not taking them into account? Either Suarez spent a lot of time with Arturo Vidal or there was something there. Another, halfway through 2021, Uruguay almost out of Qatar, and the fan clamor for changes was felt. Pointed out by everyone, Nacho thanked Maestro Tabarez and called his namesake Diego. Everything was going well until it started to go wrong. The references criticized the coach in the middle of the World Cup, which was sold as a mutiny. So little patience? Could it be that the leaders were waiting for someone else?
I don't know. It's a mystery.
Whatever, by Qatar, the courtship was broken and the Sky Blue seemed like an uncontrollable brotherhood. In the middle of the war between the former leaders of Más Unidos Casol, more people joined the dance. Bielsa and the Magnolio group.
¿A quién?
Oh, I didn't tell you, the TV rights for Uruguayan football are being put up for auction, and this group, yearning for Paco's throne, was gathering media, journalists and investors, like Luis Suarez. Surprise! Look, the former number 9, an investor in the group, chose to speak with Rodrigo Romano, a journalist from the group, about something that happened 3 months ago. Why didn't he speak at the time? Why didn't he refer to the issue in the note that Diego Lugano made a month before the problem? Why did some people support El Pistolero 100%, while the current leaders had a more cautious and even surprising attitude?
Y eso es lo que le preguntamos todos.
Because, according to Herrera, the issue, in reality, is not with El Loco. The objective is the president of the association. Hitting Bielsa for non-football matters is to show the incapacity of the current leadership. If not, just look. Days after the uproar, the gunman came out again with words that, rather than clarify, obscure.
Oops, she did it again.
If what he wanted happened, I wonder what the former number 9 really wanted. And what participation do the former leaders of Más Unidos que Nunca have in all this?
La vaca Lola tiene cabeza y tiene cola.
Mexico had its 3rd consecutive failure in the Nations League, and commentator Christian Martinoli exploded against the coach of the Tri, Jamie Lozano. Although it was an open secret that his arrival and permanence in the national team was thanks to the support of the reference, colloquially called Sacred Cows, Martinelli kicked the ball further, assuring that the reason for this support was based on an alleged possibility of manipulation. It sounds like a conspiracy theory, except for the fact that several of his colleagues and personalities of Aztec football had already noticed the situation. But it seems that in Mexico the problem of the brotherhoods has its mark. If having a clique that tries to pull the strings is already a problem, it becomes much worse if it is supported by leaders and businessmen. Clearer that their presence in the national team is sustained only by advertising contracts, a situation that was exposed by the popular Riccardo Stucco Ferretti back in 2018, in his second interim term in charge of the Tri. Prior to a series of friendlies, he was suggested not only to call up but to put as starters certain players whose level of play was not adequate for a national team. The reason? The insistence of the team's sponsors. He did not give names, although there was one that he confirmed through a rather eloquent gesture. And the fact is that the one targeted, marketing-wise, has his weight, undisputed since 2010, with a track record in Europe, a reference, and is a shareholder of one of the sponsors of the national team. Is it wrong for the players to take advantage of the window, the showcase, and profit from their image? Of course not. Is it wrong for their companies to sponsor the national team? And there, I don't know. At least, it can lend itself to misunderstandings. But, as I said, this comes from a long way back. Year 2014, whether it was because of their European present, the World Cup they played in, or the way they were eliminated, part of that generation believed, and were made to believe, their own epic, which helped them to keep their starting position, win and earn their dollars. And at the moment when it seemed that everyone, cows, managers who arranged for them and business partners, succumbed to the criticized rotations of Juan Carlos Osorio, they appear in the debut against Germany. By results cover everything up, and another chapter of epic that the cows were in charge of ruminating. Osorio leaves and the revelation, or open secret, you will say, of Tuca arrives. A coach was brought in who, beyond being diametrically opposed to his predecessor, unintentionally showed the great inconveniences that they have in the federation with projects that do not involve generating money for the board of owners. COVID and what looked good was truncated, but what made the most noise for the owners was that the box stopped ringing, so, by conviction or by pressure, a place was guaranteed for the cows. And when the work is oriented to another end than seeking the best possible performance, the result is what happened in Qatar.
Sí o sí, no hay de otra.
Was the lesson learned? New coach with the sole mission of achieving results without touching those who guarantee the money. The problem was that his good time had long passed and they blocked the replacement.
Oh, mierda!
Lozano arrives officially with the support of the reference. Unofficially, he was manipulable. Surrounded by mistrust, he gives the list for the Copa America 2024, without the cows. Many thought of the end of an era, but it was only a see you later. He did not call them, but he gave them the peace of mind that they were not out. Of course, with tremendous failure, Jimmy was exposed. Vasco Aguirre opens the door for them again until the fateful quarter-final match of the Nations League 2024 against Honduras. With the possibility of ridicule well in sight, he made 8 changes for the rematch, sacrificing the last sacred cows. The result? 4-0, to the semis, and everyone happy. Time will tell if Aguirre made a serious decision to replace him or if he was just looking to gain time. This is where we have come to a quick overview, without going into too much detail, of the most media-friendly cliques of this century. As you saw, they all have different names, but end up being the same. You might wonder how this happens? It has to do with the logic of power. For a group to develop, it is necessary for someone to allow it. It is a given. Where there are closed groups with privileges, there are inevitably leaders behind them who turn a blind eye or who encourage them, worried about their image, making money or keeping their positions. Aha! Nothing more. I send you a big hug and we will see you in the next video.